Welcome to episode 2 of the new Legends on Deck podcast. I'm Brian Koss, and I'm here with co-founder of Legends on Deck, David Conde. David, welcome. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, buddy. Good to be back again. Feels like our last episode felt like a long time ago. It's good to be back talking baseball.
Yeah, we did one Thanksgiving week, and now we're doing one Christmas week. So not too bad for the off season, right?
Yeah, we'll keep it on the holidays, right?
That's right. That's right. Gives us a little more time. Well, today our plan is to talk about how this whole thing got started, right? So
yeah, we're gonna finally discuss the beginnings of Legends on Deck, something that it's an interesting story, and hopefully we can entertain and not bore the followers.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. The interesting thing that I learned about this is I joined Legends on Deck in 2017, so that's about 2 years after you guys started.
Yeah.
So what I found out is that David and our guest, who's John Ginder, they have never seen each other face to face. They've never met in person, and they've not even been on a video conference. Is that correct?
We've never seen his face, and speaking like this, I think everything was done through phone calls, emails, text. So anyone that's been on this site, I mean, the founders have never had a discussion like this. It's crazy.
So here we are, 2015 to 2021. So we're 6 years in, and the founders of the site will meet here for the first time. So it kind of shows you the interesting part of the whole digital age of journalism, I guess.
Yep.
So
and it wasn't because we didn't live down the road from each other. He's in New York. I'm in
that's
Florida.
True. The commonality was, well, we'll get into the commonality, but the commonality is you guys both came in it from a similar background in writing, but we're going to get into that whole story. So do we want to bring John in now?
Yep, let me admit him in. 1 second. He's in the waiting room right now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we're going to, while we're waiting, I'm just going to bring attention real quick, and I could go to it at the end again. But I want to bring attention. We got a couple new articles out there on the website. Jeff Francis has been busy writing about baseball down in the Bahamas. Actually, I need to send him this, but Fox Sports recently wrote an article about Bahamas baseball and the prospects coming out of there. Maybe I'll tweet it at him, because like I was thinking to myself, wow, I've known this stuff for years, because of what Jeff Francis writes all the time.
Exactly. Awesome.
So I thought that was kind of cool that Fox Sports put something out. And then Dylan Spalding, who does his own radio show, his own podcast, The Flow Show, he writes for us from time to time too, and he's got something out on the site as well. Cool. So we're staying busy at Legends on Deck here in the off season.
Yeah, which seems to be the time of the slow part. We always find the stories that we want to write about. So
that's right.
I see that Mr. Ginder is finally here. Nice to meet you, sir.
I was going to say, it's the craziest thing ever. We've known each other like 8 years probably, and this is the first time I'm looking at your face when you're speaking. That's the strangest thing. Brian, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, John. Thanks for joining us, and we've connected a couple times now since you've been back with writing at Legends on Deck. So very cool. So here we are, our historic moment that goes back to the beginning of Legends on Deck. So I'll start with David, and then I'll go to John. So David, give me a brief background. We've talked about it before. Maybe we did on the podcast a little bit last time, but tell us how you came about starting the website and where you started, and John, similarly, I think you guys started in the same place, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, mine, I'm always bad with dates, but I think in 2013, I was living in Florida, kind of bored, wanted to do something. Baseball here is only good in the off season when they have spring training, then they leave, and then John gets to enjoy it all summer long up there. So I wanted to write on a site, just kind of share about the Mets. The Mets are my team. So I was digging around. I remember this website called Mesmerize Online, and I dug around and I contacted them and said, hey, I had done some writing on the site for some other sites, just kind of dabbling. And I said to the guy, Joe DeCaro is the owner, and I said, hey, do you mind if I, here's some of the stuff I've done. Can I write for you? And he's like, oh, yeah, great. Definitely, if you love baseball. I said, yeah, I love the Mets. So I joined on forces with him. And my idea was to write about the major league team because that's all I followed with the Mets. I knew there were minor leagues, but I never really paid attention to them. And so as I was writing for the major league side, he introduced the minor league side. And in the offseason, we do have minor league, well, in the summer, we do have minor league baseball here. So he kind of pushed me towards covering the minor league side. You have the St. Lucie Mets, you have the Miracle in your area, go to a game and just, watch the game and see if you enjoy it. I wanted the major league guys. I didn't care about the minor league guys at the time. It just wasn't an interest. I'm from the big city, New York, we follow the big guys. So I started writing for him on that side, and it's called MetsMiners.net. And eventually I ended up taking over the site. Some of the writers had stepped down, so I took it over, and he had introduced it. Hey, I got this guy that I want to kind of write with you. He's on the major league side, and his name is John, and he's gonna kind of help you out. I said, okay, no problem. So John and I kind of worked together. He did his stories. We put them on the site. It was certain thing we had to follow, a certain way of doing it. We did. It was great. And then at one point, I believe it was in 2014, there was some discrepancy with blogs and Major League Baseball, where in the past blogs would cover games and they weren't allowed. So Joe DeCaro had a good connection with the Mets, and he said, "Hey, do you want to go to spring training and cover the Mets?" And I'm like, "Yeah, definitely. I'll do that." So I went, and it was a great experience, and opened the door to other blogs getting back with the major league clubs and at least covering the Mets. And that experience led me to covering. Prior to that, I had covered a lot of minor league guys. So I fell in love with the minor leagues after interviewing a lot of the minor league guys and becoming friends with a lot of them as well. And when covering the major league spring training, that was an amazing experience. I got to bond more with the minor league guys and stuff. And writing, they knew about Mesmerize, they knew about Mets minors, was just focusing on them. So that was great and all. And then my key moment, I guess, is when I made it to the majors as a writer in June of 2014. I actually got to cover the Mets in Citi Field. It was amazing, but I think that was the turning point of what I wanted to do. I'm over here disappearing a little bit. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a background here. It gives me a little bit more light. But that was a turning point on what I really wanted to do. John had helped me out to cover the major league side. Joe was unfortunately was in the hospital, so he couldn't cover the Mets that year. I was up in New York. He gave me access to the major league game, which I did, a clubhouse and everything. And I remember that, John helped me out to cover a lot of, we had to kind of keep up, and we did. But as much as I appreciate Joe for everything that he opened doors for me and showed me and became my mentor and showed me the way of being writing as a journalist, as I'm watching the major league game and I'm in the press box, I'm just like, man, and I think maybe John and I had alluded to it once or twice. What happens when the guys leave the Mets? Do we only cover the Mets? Because we had wanted to cover other guys everywhere else, but we couldn't because it's all geared around the Mets. And as I'm sitting there in the stadium watching, I look down on my kids. Actually, they had front row seats. My cousin had worked for the Mets, so he got them some seats. I'm watching them and I'm looking, I'm like, man, I can't root for anybody up here. It's kind of like real strict. I kind of, I don't know if Joe knows about this now, but I did get the story in, but I closed my computer, went down, enjoyed the game with my kids, and then thought to myself, man, I'm gonna reach out to John after this. I think this is the time when I feel like I don't want to pursue this way. I really want to be able to write about the guys wherever they're at. If TJ Rivera, who came up with the Mets, or Dilson Herrera, or Chasen Bradford, any of these guys just moved on, I want to follow them where they go. I want to write about them. What about giving up? We've been sharing so many stories about these guys that normally are not known, because that's what John and I had talked about. And wouldn't it be great if we can do more of that, but in a different light, different way? So at that point, I'll kind of leave it. I'll shoot it over to John to share his side of it. But that's kind of how I got to the point of really sitting down with him discussing the next step.
Okay, great. Yeah. So John, were you writing for the same site, or do you have previous baseball writing experience before that?
Yeah. So
that led you. Go ahead.
yeah, my experience started a little bit earlier than that. It was like 2006, because most of my really good ideas come out of being really bored or like upset about something. So I remember looking at the local paper. Like I live up in upstate New York, by the way. So it's a balmy 27 right now. So I do have a coat on. So I was, looking at the local newspaper, and I was agitated because it was all national stuff that they're covering. And I live in a minor league city essentially. So we don't have a major league team. The closest one is 2 hours or so away. So then I'm like, why? If we have this team here that's affiliated with, it's the Houston Astros at the time, why are they not getting any sort of press coverage? So I decided, I'm like, well, I was kind of like, I thought I could put a couple sentences together, so I reached out to, it was the Tri-City Valley Cats. I reached out to them, and I said, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? Do you offer some credentials or whatever it is? And they said yes, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me! Like, how am I going to get this opportunity to like actually cover a team with zero experience? But long story short, I did that for a few years, and then as Dave can attest, life happens to me quite often. So then I had to kind of take a back seat, and then a child was born, work stuff and everything, and then it was like, right around 2013, 2014, I started writing again. I used to write I have a little hockey background. So I was writing for some hockey sites, but that, baseball's always been my thing. So I remember seeing Mesmerized again, and I remember, I'm like, man, this site has so much traffic. You have an article, and then they have discussion posts that are hundreds, thousands of responses. It's insane. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna give it a shot. I might as well try to throw my hat back in the ring. And I reached out to Joe, and he said, yeah, sure, come aboard. And it was awesome. But then it was like, I don't know, I kind of got interested, but I'm like, also, like Dave touched on, like, there's those minor league guys that all I could think about is like, what happens to them afterwards? And then, like, it seemed like for Mesmerized for a little bit, I was providing a boxing ring, and then with my article that I wrote, and then all the comments would just fight with each other. So it was never really much about my writing. It was more about, comment boards. So then I remember hooking up with Dave, and then the Mess Miners thing came along, and I remember we had specific instructions that anytime Noah Syndergaard started, we dropped everything we did, and we wrote a recap of his start. Rafael Montero was another one. And that's when I discovered like Jacob deGrom, like all these people I didn't really know. And I'm like, this isn't the greatest thing ever. But then Dave and I, like I said, we talk a lot, and then we realized that there's a lot more to these guys than the major leagues. So then we had so many conversations. I mean, hours probably on the telephone. And then it was just kind of like, what if we, maybe do something on our own here, and we can start covering the Dilson Herreras or the TJ Riveras that Dave has connections with, and that's kind of how it started. And then like the rest of it was kind of like, I guess, history, right?
Yeah.
I guess, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it seems like you guys kind of reached that moment where you were like, okay, this is cool. You were all jacked up about, getting in with this Mets site. And it's funny, when I started writing with Dave, I think my first year, I probably wrote mostly about the Tigers, because I grew up in the Detroit area, and now I almost never write about the Tigers. Like I write like 1 or 2 articles a year, about the Tigers, and it's just kind of to keep track of them, and then put, but you find a bunch of other websites and a bunch of other writers out there that are kind of one team exclusive. And like you guys said, the other cool thing, what I heard you guys say, is that, it's like you scratch the surface, right? With the big league stuff, it's exciting. And then you kind of find out, okay, what's the process behind this whole, the whole farm system, from beginning to what you see on TV, or at the ballpark. And that kind of got you guys a lot more interested, is what I understand. Let's look at the development process of the players and their personalities versus just, this guy hit a home run last night, and is he going to reach, is this person, there's a lot of people out there discussing that. But I think what you guys did with Legends on Deck is that you started seeing that there's a lot of stuff out there that people aren't writing about. Is that
one thing I want to I just want to touch on the logo. So John and I will go back.
I'm wearing the swag today.
Yeah,
too.
I have mine. Oh, can't.
I didn't get the memo.
Yeah, sorry. We got you the hat. But I remember John and I were kind of going back and forth, like, we wanted something to indicate the next star of the game, right? The next big thing. He came up with the On Deck, and we're trying to go back and forth, looking for logos, looking for this and that. I'm like, man, but it has to say something else. So we threw some other words. So then I remember I told him it was one day, Derek Jeter was retiring, and there was an event going on, and I was watching it. I'm like, man, he's such a legend. And when I said that, I reached out to John right away. I said, Legends on Deck, the next star of the game. It could be anybody. Look what happened with Jeter. He ended up, going from being the Yankee shortstop and then staying with the team and becoming this Hall of Fame, at the time, but this legend. And I think that name, it just brought it all together. Not that I didn't create it, because John had to agree to it, but it just brought the whole concept of what we were trying to do. And like Brian, you touched on it, these guys in the minor leagues, it's a whole different world. I might have interviewed like 30 guys in a short stint, fall season, reaching out, Facebook, just kind of getting, and the stories that you heard and the understanding and just where they came from and what they're trying to accomplish, and not, that majority of them don't make it to the majors, and you get this story, and the fact that we were sharing this story that way, and the fact that we were able to continue to share the story, like, John and I would go back and I mean, it wasn't just like put a website together. We really thought hard about how we wanted to put it, what the look was going to be. I mean, it cost something to get the logo done, to get the background on the website. But as you see, we haven't changed it. Why? Because it's just, it's perfect. The website, the look of it. I mean, we changed certain sections, how we move things around and categories, but just what it's about, And then now that, like John, Brian and I do a lot of the younger guys, and we even talked about with you talking about the high school guys and the college guys, and it's just that it's perfect. The name, I mean, you never want to let that go. You never want to give that up. And I think it's going to be with us until our kids take it over.
Yeah, because like I remember that conversation so distinctly, because we were trying to figure out, like, we knew what we wanted to do. We had absolutely no idea how to get there. So we just kept on throwing things out. And then I'm like, we're thinking of like the next people, like Dave said. So I'm like, on deck circle, on deck something. And then, like you said, as soon as he said Legends, I'm like, yep, there it is. That's exactly what it was as quick as that. I think once you said that word, you're like, Legends on Deck, there it is. And I'm going to touch back on something else that you said later on about never wanting to give it up, and how we have like created something that's hard to give up. And I'll come back to that because of my, my on again, off again. But it was like, it was funny because like we had so many ideas. So then we had the name, like Dave said, we found the right look. He reached out to a friend of his for the logo. And I think the logo, that was like one of the quickest things we ever did. Yeah. Like, you sent like a thing over, like, yep, that's exactly what we want right there. Yeah. And we have the picture like on your shirt right there with the on deck circle with the legs. Like it's literally everything that we had wanted to do. Like this vision that we set out for that we didn't even know existed until we started working through it, But then after that honeymoon got over, we had to figure out how we were going to cover 150 teams with just the two of us, because that's kind of a big taking. We have $1 million ideas with a $10 budget, so it made it really difficult. But I don't know. I mean, I think we can kind of keep talking about it because it's always fun. It's always fun to look back.
I think that brings up a whole bunch of new questions. So one of the things that here's one I'm thinking of. So I was watching, the World Series this year, and when I started writing for you back in 2017, the Florida Fire Frogs, the Braves single A team were playing here in Orlando. I'm in the Orlando area. And I went to a couple games, and I'm looking back. I wrote a couple articles that year, and I went back during the World Series, and I realized that Austin Riley and Ozzie Albies were both playing on the Fire Frogs that season. And here they are, winning a World Series. Austin Riley, I think he was the NLCS MVP. You had all this thing. So I'm sure you guys going back, who were some of the big players or guys that you might have covered early that you didn't know they were going to be big at the time, or whether you interviewed them or whether you just kind of, covered them and watched and kind of saw them develop?
Yeah. So I'll take it first if that's all right. All right.
Yep.
So again, I have a short season single A team affiliated with the Houston Astros where I am. Not anymore because of all the realignment.
They got rid of
That's another
the New York Penn League. Yeah.
So when I first started, Hunter Pence was one of the guys. And I remember this scrawny, weird looking batting stance. And I'm like, who is this guy? And then he 2 times in that game launched the bat into the crowd. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I thought these guys were professionals. And here guys launching a bat. I'm like, I'm going to remember who this guy is. I'm going to look him up. So I get home and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's Hunter Pence, their #1 prospect. I couldn't believe it. And then, so he was one of the bigger guys. Then when I really covered the team, Bud Norris, I don't know if that name rings a bell to anybody. Jason Castro. I mean, he's still in the league now. Ben Zobrist. So these are a lot of guys that came through. Jose Altuve. I didn't cover him, but I did go to a bunch of games that he was at. George Springer. So many of the Astros now are here.
Oh yeah, you had Astros guys there. I mean, at that time when you were starting, that's when all those guys that became the Astros superstars were starting out, right?
So I'll share this one story that I always I regret how I handled this. So I was covering the Miracle here in Fort Myers. This is when I was able to get on the field. They gave me access to the field, so I'm doing photos and stuff. And the Mets were in town, and I wrote a story on one of the ball players. Can't recall his name right now, but he's not in baseball right now. But he had a great week, so I wrote, a play of the week for him. And standing next to me in the dugout was Pete Alonso. I didn't really know who Pete Alonso was at the time because since we're focusing on so many teams, I would only pick up on certain guys and then run to the next team, trying to make sure we covered everybody. So it was just Pete Alonso standing there. I said, and he hit a bomb. I was like, he made a good play in the field. It's this guy. So when I looked him up, he was having a better week than the guy that I covered. So I'm like, oh man, I screwed up that one. And I never got to talk to him, never got to meet him. And here he is, hitting bombs all over the field. So that's the only probably minor leaguer that I didn't really connect with that at least got to the majors. I mean, some of the other guys, like I mentioned, TJ Rivera, met him. He was my first professional interview in 2014. He started it all. I interviewed him here in person in Fort Myers when he played with St. Lucie Mets, played against the Miracle. And we're friends till today. Chase and Bradford is another guy that we covered. And I might have had my favorites that I covered, but it was a way to, I know when TJ and Jason and Dilson Herrera were trying to get into the majors, they were having great minor league seasons, and no one was looking at them. Man, I was pumping out articles left and right about, what they're doing in the minor leagues and how come they can't get called up. And I think, when they got called up, it wasn't anything I did. It was what they were doing. But I just felt like, I remember Terry Collins made a comment about TJ Rivera. He says, which was kind of odd. Yeah, I found out about this guy in the minor leagues by reading all these stories in social media. I'm like, what do you mean? How do you not know about TJ Rivera? How do you not know he's tearing it up? You're the manager of the Mets. So it was just awesome to not kind of know these guys and see them carry along and go, but I don't think I've ever met anyone that was younger like John did and kind of became a star. Because I started this late in the game. I started this when the guys were already in Class A advanced, AA. A lot of guys that I knew in low A didn't really make it too far. I knew a kid that got drafted by the Mets in Florida. He was a friend of the family. My dad, knew him and went to my brother's school in Ocala. And, he made it, I think, to Class A, but he was a good ball player. He made it. So I kind of saw that journey. And it kind of gave me a better understanding of the game. Come out of high school and you get drafted, there's no guarantee unless you're Bryce Harper, right? You come out of college, you might have a better opportunity, but how long does that take? You come from the international, you're signed when you're 16 years old. by the time you're 23, you're a grown man. You're in the game 7 years. You're only 23 years old. So you see all these different stories, and that's why it was great to kind of go everywhere with it. Like John said, but it was like, okay, you cover the East Coast, I cover the West Coast. Write a story about the Giants, write a story about the Mets, and let's just kind of go with that. And I think I don't remember when it started that we kind of would find our first writer. I don't remember who it was. Maybe John does. But it was kind of like on Twitter, just kind of like growing the site, pushing ourselves out there, and then using the guys that we knew, like in the game itself, to kind of like push it. And I'll leave on this note, on this topic. I didn't know who knew us. I knew who knew us with the Mets minors. I didn't know if anyone knew us with the Legends on Deck. So one day when the Mets, I knew some guys knew, but I didn't know a lot of guys knew. And one day we're there. I was at the covering of them. I was always at the Mets St. Lucie Mets Merkle games, and I was covering a game, and I was waiting for one of the ball players to come out and to talk to him. And Tomas Nido walked by, and he was a catcher with the Mets in Major League now. He was with them at the time, and I said, "Hey, Tomas, I'd like to talk to you." And he goes, "Yeah, I know who you are." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, you're Dave Conde, Legends on Deck." I was like, "Okay." And he just like, I was just stunned that, our name was getting out there. People were getting to know us, who we were, and they liked what we were doing because we told a real story. We didn't fabricate things. We didn't make a player look bad. We might have attacked the ownership a little bit or the managers a little bit, but we did not attack the ball players. It was they looked at us as not journalists, but writers, like writing the true stories and really putting them out there and, making them look like, wow, I want to know about this guy more. Where is he? So the readers would love that. The families loved it. And it was just like, giving a guy a time of day that no one even wrote about. No one knew that he existed until Legends on Deck put him on the platform.
Yeah, that was my other, you guys were talking about writers, so you got, I think John made the comment, like, here we are, we got 150 teams to cover. So obviously you can't cover all the teams in every system and every team that's out there. Was there some kind of plan to do that, or was it more like we're just going to kind of take people as they come and let them write about what they want to write about? Because that's when I got in contact with David, I was like, well, what do I want to write about? And he was like, well, kind of pick the stuff you want to cover. So I was like, well, that's cool, because it gives you, gives you the freedom. I know there's other sites out there. If you look them up, I want to write about baseball, and then they give you a very, very narrow, a narrow path for what you can write about. What was the thought process there on finding writers, or once you found writers, how to guide them?
I think one of our first ones was Christina, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Editor from the Mets. She wrote with us at Mets Minors, and then she kind of came on board as one of the first ones, I think. And then Brian Mullen.
Oh, Mullen. He played. He was worked with the Twins. He was the guy that knew the Twins.
Yeah. So I think those are the two that I remember. But I think a lot of it was through Twitter. So how do you drum up interest about a site? Is maybe commenting as yourself with your profiles, Legends on Deck guy, and then comment during, like, try to find game threads. And then you find people that are interested in talking about it. You're like, hey, by the way, I've got this place, you seem to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to come on board and cover, the Arizona Diamondbacks, because we knew really not a lot about that system. There are a lot of teams on the West Coast, from the East Coast, we don't see a lot, because I was way past my bedtime now. But so I think that was a lot of it too. We were just trying to find ways. One of the guys, Kevin Larkin, that is on the site, I found him because he wrote a history of the Valley Cats. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I know a lot about this. I can kind of talk to you. And then we kind of hit it off, and we brought him along. And he didn't really do so much minor league stuff as like covering the Negro Leagues and all this other, like, just something else. And it was just one of those things you're like, come on, bring it on. Like,
just to touch on that quick, John.
Yeah.
We gave him the platform to talk about the Negro Leagues. He took all what he wrote and he wrote a book. He published a book on that. And so it kind of helped him to kind of get where he needed to get, because that's where he's a historian on the Negro Leagues. Yeah. And
a copy of that book is actually in the Negro League Hall of Fame. So It's great. And it was just one of those things like Dave and I knew,
Story.
like what are we going to provide somebody? We can't pay them. We can't have them go cover games, but they can cover from a distance because that's what we're doing. So then anyone who had any sort of interest, we like brought them on, tried it out. If it worked, it worked. Some people wrote a lot and then left. Some people kind of came on, didn't write anything. Or some people came on and are still there. So I think that's all of it. We're just trying to find these avenues into getting, because everyone wants to have a voice of their team.
Yeah.
And I think again, the minor leagues are pretty underrepresented, I think, on the internet as far as blogs that cover things.
You're lucky to find local papers that will cover a lot of the teams. I mean,
so that and we just wanted it. We knew we wanted like-minded people that knew about baseball, that like talking about it and sharing these stories of guys that you never really heard of, that you may never hear of again. But that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to bring those out so people could know about them instead of your all-stars that they read about all the time.
Yeah, I think that's cool, because I remember, what is it, David? I think it was 18 maybe, or was it 19 that we did the Florida State League All-Star game?
It was 19, right?
Okay.
Right
yeah, maybe it was 19. So we did all these profiles on the players that played in that afterwards, and we were getting all kinds of comments and tweets and postings from family members of those players, as I remember. I was like, wow, they're like the dads out there retweeting it, and there's brothers retweeting it, and there's you're getting a lot of play. Like you said, you guys are bringing a spotlight on guys that may not have had. I mean, I'm sure they had the spotlight on them when they were in high school, but you get into a system from major league team system in the minors, and you're just one of the players. So you get some coverage from somebody that's paying attention, and it's pretty cool for these guys, I think.
Yeah, I think they all loved it. I all appreciated it. Like I said, I'm sure John could drop a couple names, some guys that he still might have a connection with today, and they appreciate that. Like I said, there's guys that I still know today that I follow them. Jason Bradford made it to the majors, Dilson made it to the majors, TJ made it to the majors, and they appreciate when you reach out to them and say, hey, great game, man. They're major leaguers. Do they need that? Probably not, but they appreciate, because they know that you've been on the journey with them since day one. Like, you just didn't jump on the bandwagon when they became a major leaguer. You were with them when they were in the minors, trying to figure out if they were going to make it to the majors, and here you are writing about them, letting people know, hey, this is the guy you need to pay attention to, because look what he's doing. And so it just, what we created was just, I don't think anyone ever created before, honestly. I don't think anyone ever created the way we did it. There were other sites out there, but what we focused on and the things we focused wasn't just the stats of the day, like John said before. It wasn't just the home run last night. It was, where did they, where they come from? Where do they live? What was their background? What made them major leaguers? Baseball players. Where does it take? Their families. It was the one time I don't know at what point, but I reached out to the wives of the minor leaguers and said, hey, I want to start a series of you guys writing your story. And I had a couple of wives that wrote their story on what it was like on their end to go through what, following their husbands or their boyfriends and being on the journey with them. And I wish that would have taken off to something bigger. I think there's other sites that were somewhat similar to that. It didn't, but it did open the door to show that we were trying to share the stories that no one else could share. And if that's not journalism, I mean, we're pretty much putting out there what people want to know, and I think, like I said, Legends of Deck is going to be around for as long as we're going to have it, because there's always that story. There's always that kid that we don't know today that's in Little League Baseball. Maybe in the next 20 years, he's a star of the game. And like, oh man, we wrote about him when he was 10 years old,
Just like our name. When Dave brought that idea of having the wives write, I'm like, that's gold, because there's zero places that would ever give the time for that. Mm-hmm. And then when we had the first couple, you're like, this is great. It was like Tales from Home, I think is what it was, because home is kind of like what encompasses everything about their lives. So it was just like a brilliant idea. Like Dave said, I don't know, maybe we got a little too anxious firing the stories out too quick or what it was, but I thought it was a tremendous idea. And yeah, like I said, I wish it took off a little bit more than it did. But trial and error, or whatever the saying is.
Yeah, it was called
Sure.
our View from Home.
View from Home. That's it.
Very cool. Well, it's interesting, bringing it to like a modern issue. I saw just a couple months ago, I think it was after the season was over, Major League Baseball announced that they were going to start paying for minor league player housing.
Yep.
So I'm sure you've heard, having those conversations with these players, we know that most minor league players aren't making a lot of money. In fact, I think they make below minimum wage somehow. But there's the housing issue seems like a big step for them. Did you ever get any either of you guys get any sense for that lifestyle that they have to live as minor leaguers?
The short season single A. I mean, they made like $15,000 or something because there's only a few months of the season. So there are like 5 or 6 guys living together in like a 1-bedroom apartment. Like the things that you actually hear, like that's true, that they lived through that and they struggled and they're trying to make a living. And during like the break, I saw some of them working at the mall, working in like apparel stores. Like, hey, wait a second, what are you doing here? You're a baseball player. Why are you selling hats at Lids? But they had no choice because they just weren't compensated. So the fact that they're making these steps, I think, is really, really good. Again, Dave and I wish we had a hand in that. I wish we came up with that idea ourselves, but
well, yeah, there you go. I mean, I know David a few years ago, maybe it was 2 seasons ago now. I don't know. We've lost a lot of time here in the last couple of years, but you were talking with different organizations about, minor league player conditions and pay and all that stuff.
Yeah, so More Than Baseball is an organization that was started by an man. I'm losing my mind today, but with the names of, but I think he played with the Mets organization, and he started this site to really kind of give back and open up the eyes of everyone to kind of bring in sponsorships and schooling, and I mean he really grew it to a point where he had some ball players involved in it as well, and it was just to kind of give his minor leaguers a chance, and I because of Legends on Deck, I have a friend of mine that was a school teacher with the Red Sox, and she would teach the international ball players English, and she brought me on to just kind of like do mock interviews with them because I have the website that allowed me to come on with the Red Sox as a volunteer, and I would have never said no because you're helping these guys come into this country to learn the language because we can get deep into it, but they're pretty much they come here from another country. They don't know the language. They don't know anything. They're told to play baseball. Just play baseball and do it the best way you can. And imagine you go into another country, you know the language, you don't know anybody, and you're told, and I'm sure there was a movie on that called Sugar. And if you ever guys get to watch it, it was amazing depiction of what it's about. When you come here, you don't know the language, you're sent to some town in Idaho or Iowa or a town that doesn't really probably have any Hispanics, and you're told to play baseball, but the culture is a culture shock. And then you have to adapt to all that. So that coming in that way, trying to adapt, I was able to learn a lot of the stories from them as well. And then when they would go off to the season, like John said, it's probably even more, 7, 8 in 1 2-bedroom home, trying to make payment, and they have to pay for that. And then if they're in a away game, they got fed. If they're in a home game, they got to find someplace to eat before the game, and then they got to find transportation to the field. And I literally connected with More Than Baseball and try to get some of these guys help. And I was on the phone one year calling, real estate agents and calling locations, trying to find a car for one of the guys. And they literally had to, whatever money they had together, had to put that together to purchase, to just get to the field. And they maybe lived less than 10 miles from the field. And they had to be at the field on time. And they had to become ready to play. And if they weren't, then what do you have? You have the fans on them, and they went on them. They're not. But hello, do you understand what's going on? Do you understand why they may be having a bad game, or why they're not performing well today, or why they may just not be all there? Because they got 1,000 other things in their mind to worry about. Where they're gonna live, where they're gonna eat, where they're gonna sleep, how they're gonna get to the field, when they get paid, all over again. So what More Than Baseball did was really open the door, and they had a lot of guys that jump on board with them. And they really opened the door to what baseball is doing right now. If anything else, I'm not going to take credit for anything. I think Legends on Deck just brought minor league baseball players to light bigger than maybe other sites had. And then more than this organization with a bunch of other ones that are out there really open the door for Major League Baseball to wake up and say, hey, you're making millions of dollars up there, trickle some money down, do more for these guys. These guys are giving up their whole livelihoods, and it's a privilege. Not everyone makes it to the minors. Not everyone makes it to the majors. It is a privilege, but it's a privilege that, you still need the tools. You still need to be able to survive. And I think a lot of what John and I did was giving these guys the day in the spotlight, right? And an article that went out to their family, and their family got to read. Maybe the aunts and uncles didn't know what they were doing. Oh, wow, Jimmy's doing great. Look at Jimmy, he had a great week this week. Jimmy retires from baseball, doesn't do anything, but Jimmy has that article to show what he did that one season. Legends on Deck covered him. Look what he did that one season. We were known. We had 1 year 50,000 readers. Now, that may not be a lot for some other big sites, but 50,000 readers. Okay, I'll give 40 for us going back and forth into the site. But either way, that many readers coming to a site that was only 2 years old at the time. Okay, and gaining 4,000 or 5,000 readers a month. We watched the numbers. We did whatever we can. We know at one point we maybe got bigger than what we were ready for, but I think it's just because the stories were out there and we wanted to share it, and we wanted to make sure that each guy that we told the story of, that story got out and people read it and people understood and people appreciated what he was trying to do. Because I'm sure out of all the guys we've met, half of them are probably out of baseball and doing other things, but they're always going to remember that. And I'm glad that we were kind of part of the journey with them.
Right, and some of those articles really took off. I remember I wrote a prospects on deck. That was always our thing, was who's next, right? Yeah. So we would go through all the stats and be like, oh, I'm going to write about this guy. And it was Zach Godley, who I don't remember. I think it was this ridiculous strikeout number, something about his stat line. I was like, I'm gonna write about this guy. So I wrote something, tweeted it out. His father, like you said, saw it on Twitter, then followed me on Twitter, and then shared that article all over the place. Yeah. And that happened something similar when I came back about the Tampa Bay's prospect too. I wrote something, I tweeted it out to him and the team, and then they retweeted it, and then they retweeted it, and then family is but it doesn't always go that way, right? We'll try to copy that same method, and then it just won't work. So just trying to find these new ways of doing things was really challenging, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's very cool stuff. They're just getting that, like you said, these things kind of take on a life of their own. One more topic, I think, and then we'll try to give you what's the future going to look like of Legends on Deck after that. But the other topic that I wanted to mention, and this is related also to minor league players, or minor league, just the whole system, right? So earlier this year, I wrote just basically breakdowns of each league after each level after the consolidation that happened with minor league baseball. They got rid of, over 40 teams, I believe. And there's been some shifting of that. I know that some of the teams were turned into Summerwood bat leagues and different things. But what do you think, each of you individually, what do you think that the results of that are or might be? And whether, the downsides and any maybe potential opportunities as well for minor league baseball.
I'll give it to you first, John.
All right. First and foremost, you consolidate anything, you're bumping people out of jobs. So, you get rid of 40 teams, and that's what I'm not good at math. I'm a history guy. I'm not a math guy, but just say several hundred players are now without a job. So now they have to find other means, which, they're still trying to play. So again, I use the Valley Cats for an example. They were offered, I think, to get into that summer league, and they declined. So now they're an independent league. So I think a lot of teams folded. Maybe players had to stop playing or find different avenues. And, I think anytime you do something like that, it's at the risk of people's livelihood. I mean, I guess it makes sense to an extent because not all teams have 7 minor league teams, because then that kind of dilutes the pool too. So I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think that they have a plan. You know, they have people that get paid a lot of money to make these decisions and think about the future stuff. But I mean, I'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I don't really have much more than that.
David?
I did not like what they did. It's, you know, because like John said, you know, we're so so much thinking about the minor leaguers, right, and how it affects their lives, and we were so heavy on that, worrying about them. And when you do that, you just kind of just shut the door and say, okay, well, go figure it out now. Figure out what you're going to play. You know, we used you for what we need you for, and now we don't need you anymore. The shifting of teams, the shutting down of organizations, it's just, you know, like John said, you know, a town that has minor league baseball and that's all they have, and then you go and you shut down the lights, then what do they have left? And, you know, the love of the game. Major League Baseball talks about connecting the communities and bringing baseball to communities. How are you going to do that if you're shutting down cities of where baseball is the biggest thing they have? You know, you take that away from them. I think in my opinion, it was all money and it wasn't really understanding what's going on and how baseball has been growing over the years. I mean, you know, when you had the whole era of Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa home run going crazy, baseball was on fire. Then they came out with the you know, the HGH came out, and then they kind of brought people away from baseball. And then now, you know, delving into the minor leagues, it just, you realize the love of the game is there. That is true baseball to me. You go to a field, you watch the game, you fall in love with these young guys, you know, you're watching them play the game. They're real. They understand, you know, what it means to have the fans there. You know, major level is great, but it's different. It's more theatrical, right? You're in a major league game, you don't really can't get, unless you know a ball player, you're not getting close to them. You're there to watch a theater and then you go home. Minor leagues, you're involved. You're involved on the field. You know, they have activities for the kids. You know, they bring everyone together. And it's just a different atmosphere that when you get rid of that, what are you telling the fans? So I really didn't like it. I don't like the shift of like now the Brooklyn Cyclones are the high A ball. You know, I enjoyed high A ball in Florida. Florida State League was an amazing.
Yeah, that is, I'm bummed about that.
They
took our high A ball and they switched it.
Low A ball, you know, not to say that low A ball doesn't have great ball players, but
true.
Florida State League was one of the best leagues that were out there with the talent.
You get the top draft picks coming right there.
Exactly. A lot of the guys from the Florida State League made it straight to the majors, either double A straight to the majors or class A straight to the majors. So when you take that away, I don't think they're in touch with what's going on with baseball now. Baseball, to my mind, you know, has just become that sport that, you know, in the minor league side, that everyone is just attracted to. Like one of the things I want to do, and I told John, and I was hoping that we would do it, is travel to every minor league team that we can in the country and just watch a game, you know, and enjoy it. Not write about it, just enjoy it and get the atmosphere of it, you know, of what it feels like to be there and the events and everything else, man. I loved taking my kids to the Miracle, taking them to other minor league teams around town and just experiencing what it's like in that field. A lot of the fields were empty, not enough fans, but it didn't matter. It was baseball, you know, and you were enjoying it.
Yeah, you're right. You really get to be a part of the process usually. I like that. What you said is when you go to a minor league game, you're a part of the game, more so than just being a spectator.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, John.
No, sorry. Yeah. It seems like baseball is trying to fix parts of the game that really don't need fixing. Like I think they're focusing on so many other things that I don't think are the actual problem, in my personal opinion. And who am I? I'm nobody. I'm just a fan, right? But it's like, but I don't know. I mean, the game itself, like home runs. I don't care about hitting, you know, someone hitting 75,000 home runs. I just want to see a good ball game, and I think they're focusing on the wrong things that may be broken. Obviously, you know, we're in a lockout right now, which doesn't look good in my opinion. I don't have very high hopes for coming out of this thing anytime soon. But it's like that's the part that's broken, not so much the game or how long the game takes.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think, you know, I was looking into it a little bit with the league consolidation. So you got the teams that shifted, players that you know, are maybe like you guys said, looking for a place to play. And I didn't even realize it until I really dug into it. All the administration of the leagues was consolidated. So the Florida State League, for what we were talking about, they no longer exist as a league. They are actually considered single A Southeast. So there is a regional director of sorts, like a regional commissioner that oversees a bunch of minor league divisions now. So they completely redid the whole thing. So there's not like that the Southern League or the New York Penn League, which was completely eliminated. These leagues have been around, some of them for 50 to 100 years. And they had their own history, their own traditions, their own towns, their own, impact. So there's like a whole layer of things. It's, yes, we talk about the ball players, and of course that's important, but it's like the towns and the ballparks and the traditions and the history they have, that it's kind of been wiped out real quick.
Yeah.
It's still there. It might be, actually, that might be something interesting for us to write about. But there's a whole bunch of it. There's a whole bunch of changes that happen really quick with all that. Now I'll wrap it up here. I know we could probably go on for a long time, but I'll let each of you go. John, I'll have you go first. Future of writing, future of Legends on Deck, whatever it is, writing, more podcasting. I don't know what other kind of things we could do on Legends on Deck, but go ahead. What do you think?
I think the answer to that is yes. Because it could really be anything. Now finally, like, we get to touch on it too much, but I just finally graduated college as a 46-year-old man. So now I have time to get back to it again, and I'm really excited about it. And I think, I guess there's so many options. Like you just said, you just brought up an idea about these defunct leagues now. Like, I think that's great. I think we could do some investigative stuff, reach out to the people who used to be employed. Oh, I shouldn't give that away, right? Yeah.
It's just a teaser.
Yeah.
A teaser.
But I think there's still so many options. I think we can continue doing what we've been doing to the best of our ability. We can't cover everybody, so we just have to try to find those diamonds in the rough. And I think we just keep going. And like Dave said, it's going to live on until we don't want it to live on anymore.
Very cool, David.
There was a time, I'll admit that Legends on Deck had maybe one writer left, because like John touched on, people come and people go. We all have things that go on in our life. I know at one point John got real busy with school and with work. And when that happens, we always talked about, listen, this is not a job. We're not getting paid to do this. This is for the love of the game. So if we can't do it, it's okay. Take the time you need, because the site's not going anywhere. They always get a story to get out, So I think at one point, I was at a down point where I just felt like, man, am I ever going to find another writer to keep this going? And I did. And it was the love of the writers that kind of just let us know, hey, don't get rid of the site. Don't keep it going. Even if you have one story a month, it'll pick up again. And it did, and we got it out there to the we just kept writing. People, it wasn't as big as it was at one point, but that's fine. It's where it needs to be. And this whole thing with, how minor league baseball is changed and stuff, there's probably other stories that need to be told, and more about the minor leagues and more about the ball players that are out there. Maybe about the ball players that, not to give away stuff, but maybe about the ball players that have to shift, where they're at right now, what's going on with them. I guess maybe some of their fans want to know that don't know. We can find out. We have the channels to find out. So I think Legends on Deck is going to continue to move forward as long as, people want to know about what's going on in the minor leagues. And there's always gonna be downtime. If we ever get shut down again in this crazy world of ours, we'll have a lot of time to write. But even if we don't, like, I think in the beginning, John and I always talked about not getting too big too fast. And then we got too big too fast, which was okay. But then coming back, and I might have alluded to John recently, was that I'm okay with being where we're at right now. I'm okay. The site has gone through a little bit of a up and down, but I think we're back on the up. I think the interest is there again. The podcast is great because we get to put a face to people who haven't never met face to face, which still boggles my mind, right? 6 years into this. But it shows the desire and the love that we have, and why we created this. 6 years later, we may not be the biggest site on the internet, but we're still here. Legends on Deck is still there. you know, and it's still growing. And I think it's gonna go probably beyond us. You know, as long as I keep paying the bills to keep the lights on, and which is another blessing in disguise with, you know, the person who's running our site for us, and the fact we're able to, you know, the trademark and domains and to keep that going. I think it's just because we created this as a platform to have others come in, share their opinion of the love of the game, and if they chose to move on, fine. They knew we couldn't pay them, but this wasn't about, I think, becoming rich. This was about sharing the passion of what Legends on Deck, what it means about the game we love, and just getting it out there and giving someone that opportunity to write and be a unique writer and write the thing. We've had photographers on the site, you know, to share their work with us. I mean, Gabe Rodriguez, you have Matthew Copper. I had another guy that took some photos, and we used it, and that was great because John and I know how difficult it was to find photos and not get penalized for using someone's photo that we didn't give them credit, right? We had to, so it was like, man, what if we had our own photos? You know, what if we can get to the games and get our own photos and put our logo on it? Anyone can touch, that's our photos, and we did that. So we accomplished so much with this site, so much that, I mean, it's great to sit here and be able to talk about it so many years later and know that it's still here, you know, and it's still there, and we get to grow. And I know when John gets his time after he graduates and gets situated with his job, you know, like I told him, you write what you want to write about. There's no, you know, I'll touch on one thing. There was one time that we had a schedule. You write this, and we cover this. We had this, you know, and it got crazy, right? And then if you didn't write, you were overwhelmed because if you didn't get that article in, and we decided, hey, we can't do that. We can't pay, we're not paying anybody, so we can't force people to stay to a schedule. We can't. It just has to be a passion for it, a love for it. And one day we'll venture out to the West Coast. One day we'll be big over there, you know. But I think we're East Coast heavy, Central a little bit. And one day Legends on Deck will be in the West Coast. But until that day happens, we're still gonna love what we do. So,
well, maybe this podcast will get us a couple more writers and photographers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, P.S. if you're on the West Coast,
right. All right, guys. Well, thank you. I'm glad I got to facilitate the first face-to-face meeting with you guys. Very good conversation, and Merry Christmas to you both.
Yeah, same to you.
Hey, we'll get John down here in spring training 1 year finally. We'll
one of these years.
Face for real.
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, guys.
All right, have a good one.
Until the next time.